The bond they had built over the past weeks began to show signs of true strength. It wasn't just the laughter, the shared stories, or even the quiet companionship that made it special. It was the way they had begun to rely on each other in subtle, meaningful ways, the way small gestures carried enormous weight, and the way understanding seemed to flow effortlessly between them. One morning, she woke up to a sudden realization. She had never felt so connected to another person. The thought of sharing her days, her fears, and her joys with someone who truly listened was comforting and thrilling all at once. She smiled to herself, remembering the moments of the past days, the walks, quiet talks, the shared coffees, the lingering silences that spoke volumes. There was an anticipation she hadn't expected, a gentle excitement for the days to come. He, too, felt the deepening connection. His mornings, once dull and rushed, now carried a sense of purpose and curiosity. He looked forward to seeing her, not with anxiety or expectation, but with genuine interest in the person she was and the life they were beginning to create together. There was a sense of peace in knowing that someone cared, someone understood, and that this connection wasn't fleeting, but growing steadily, quietly, and beautifully. That day, they decided to explore a part of the city they had never visited before. It was a neighborhood filled with narrow streets, colorful buildings, and small shops that seemed frozen in time. They wandered together, discovering hidden cafes, quaint bookstores, and street performers who played music that made the air feel alive. They laughed at the unexpected sights and shared their thoughts about the world, their conversations moving effortlessly between light-hearted humor and deeper reflections. She noticed how attentive he was, not just to her words, but to her reactions, her expressions, and her body language. He noticed the way she listened, truly listened, to everything he shared, the way her eyes reflected curiosity and empathy. Every glance, every gesture, every smile strengthened the unspoken bond between them. It was in these ordinary moments that extraordinary feelings began to emerge, subtle yet undeniable, as the day went on. They found themselves sitting on a bench overlooking a quiet square, watching people go about their lives. She spoke softly about her hopes for the future, the dreams she had long held close, and the fears that sometimes held her back. He shared his own reflections, admitting moments of doubt and vulnerability that he rarely expressed to anyone. They didn't try to fix each other's worries or offer solutions. They simply listened, provided comfort, and offered silent reassurance that they were in this together. The afternoon turned into evening, and the city lights began to twinkle like stars brought down to earth. They walked along the streets hand in hand, feeling the warmth of each other's presence. The connection they had cultivated over time had reached a level of trust and intimacy that made even the simplest moments feel profound. There was a comfort in knowing that silence could be shared without awkwardness, that laughter could be spontaneous, and that vulnerability was met with understanding rather than judgment. Their relationship began to show its depth in small gestures. He would bring her favorite coffee when he knew she had a busy morning. She would leave little notes for him to find, simple words of encouragement, or small doodles that made him smile. These gestures were not grand or showy, but they carried a significance that words alone could not capture. They were learning that love often lived in the details, in the quiet attentiveness that showed care without demand. One evening, they found themselves at a small, cozy restaurant that overlooked the river. They talked about their week, their small victories, and the challenges they had faced. She shared her reflections on a project that had finally come together, and he expressed pride in her perseverance. He spoke about a problem at work that had been resolved, and she offered her admiration for his patience and determination. They celebrated each other's accomplishments with genuine joy. No envy, no comparison, just pure appreciation. After dinner, they took a slow walk along the riverside. The water reflected the city lights, creating a shimmering path that felt almost magical. They spoke about their childhoods, the experiences that had shaped them, and the lessons they had learned along the way. They discovered shared values, similar perspectives on life, and a mutual respect that made them feel more connected than ever before. It was in these conversations, deep and meaningful, that they realized the potential of their relationship and the depth of care they held for each other as the night grew darker. They found a quiet spot on the riverbank. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he held her gently, feeling the calmness that came from being near someone who understood and accepted him. They didn't need words in that moment. The silence was filled with warmth, trust, and the quiet thrill of knowing they had found something rare and precious. The following days brought more shared experiences. From spontaneous walks to quiet mornings at the cafe, they explored new places, tried new foods, and discovered small joys in the city that they had never noticed before. Every day seemed richer, brighter, and more meaningful because of the presence of the other. They learned to celebrate the ordinary, finding beauty in simple moments that were made extraordinary by shared companionship. Yet, even in the midst of growing happiness, they faced minor challenges. There were times when schedules conflicted, when stress or fatigue threatened to create distance, and when misunderstandings arose from miscommunication. But each time they approached these moments with patience and care, learning to navigate difficulties without letting them overshadow the connection they had built. They discovered that love required effort, understanding, and the willingness to see beyond immediate frustrations. One afternoon, as rain began to fall softly, they found shelter under a small awning. Watching the droplets dance on the pavement, she laughed as they were caught in the unexpected drizzle, and he joined in, feeling a childlike joy that he hadn't experienced in years. They talked about the unpredictability of life, the beauty of unexpected moments, and the importance of embracing experiences together. The rain, rather than being an inconvenience, became a symbol of the spontaneity, joy that came with sharing life fully with someone. They also began to open up about deeper personal experiences, sharing past heartbreaks, fears, and moments of vulnerability. These conversations were not easy, but they deepened their understanding of each other and strengthened the trust that had become the foundation of their relationship. They discovered that being truly known and accepted was a gift, and they cherished the honesty and courage it required. One evening, they visited a small hill overlooking the city. Watching the sun set in hues of orange and pink, they sat quietly, holding hands, feeling the calm that came from shared presence. She spoke about her hopes for the future, the dreams she wished to pursue, and the kind of life she imagined. He responded with his own reflections, sharing his aspirations and the values he held dear. The conversation was not about agreement or planning, but about understanding, respect, and the joy of dreaming together. The days turned into weeks, and with each shared experience, their relationship deepened. They celebrated successes, comforted each other in disappointments, and discovered a rhythm that balanced independence with connection. The quiet moments, the shared laughter, and the attentive gestures all contributed to a bond that felt both strong and tender. By the end of this chapter in their story, they had moved beyond the excitement of early connection into a phase of genuine understanding and support. Their love was no longer just about attraction or curiosity. It had become a partnership built on trust, empathy, and the willingness to be present for each other in both joy and challenge. They had learned that true love was not just about grand gestures, but about the small, meaningful acts of care that created a lasting foundation. As they walked home one night, the city lights reflecting softly on the streets, they felt a quiet contentment. They had faced small challenges, celebrated personal victories, and discovered the beauty of shared experiences. Their connection was strong, growing steadily, and filled with the promise of a future built on mutual understanding, respect, and love. It was a love that felt real, enduring, not worth every moment they had spent discovering it together. The days had become a rhythm of comfort and joy, a dance between two people who had learned to care for each other deeply. Their connection had grown beyond shared moments and laughter. It had become a foundation, a quiet strength that carried them through both mundane routines and unexpected challenges. They had discovered in each other a presence that made life feel brighter and more meaningful, a warmth that was both grounding and inspiring. She had always loved mornings. There was something about the soft sunlight spilling across her small apartment, the quiet hum of the city waking up, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee that made her feel alive. Today felt different, though. Today carried a strange mix of anticipation and unease she couldn't shake. She wasn't sure why, but she had a feeling something unusual was about to happen. He, on the other hand, had never been much for mornings. He usually rushed through his routine, late to work more often than not, and rarely stopped to notice the little things. But today, for some reason, he had left his apartment earlier than usual, taking a different route than he normally would. It was a path lined with trees that danced with the morning breeze, and streets that smelled faintly of fresh bread from the bakery he had never tried before. Something inside him told him to slow down, to pay attention. Even if he didn't know why, their meeting happened as naturally as sunrise. She was sitting at the small cafe near the corner of the street, the one with tiny tables pressed against the window, where the morning sun made patterns on the wooden floor. She had her notebook open, scribbling thoughts and small stories she liked to imagine, her pen moving almost of its own accord. She was lost in her world when he entered, shaking off the chill of the morning air. Glancing around for an empty table, their eyes met briefly, a fleeting moment that neither could explain. He noticed the intensity with which she wrote, the way her brow furrowed slightly, as if the weight of her thoughts was pressing on her. She noticed the quiet calm in the way he stood, the small smile he offered the barista that seemed genuine in a way that made her heart skip. Neither of them spoke at first, and yet something unspoken connected them. He chose a table not far from hers, ordering a simple coffee and a croissant. He didn't know why, but he wanted to sit close enough to watch her without seeming intrusive. She sensed someone nearby, someone watching, but she didn't feel uncomfortable. There was something oddly soothing in his presence, a silent reassurance that made her return to her writing with a lighter heart. Minutes passed. But in that short span, 1,000 tiny observations were made. He noticed the small details that most people ignored, the way her hair caught the light, slight tapping of her pen against the paper, the quiet hum she made when she was lost in thought. She noticed the way he sipped his coffee slowly, savoring it, and how his eyes sometimes closed for a brief moment, as if savoring the world around him in his own private way. It wasn't until she dropped her pen that their worlds collided properly. The pen rolled toward his table, stopping just at the edge of his notebook. He picked it up, holding it out to her. Their fingers brushed briefly when she took it, and for a moment, the entire cafe seemed to fade away. A simple smile passed between them, small yet significant. Like the opening line of a story yet to be written, they exchanged a few words. Casual at first, about the pen, about the cafe, about the weather. But soon, the conversation began to flow more naturally, effortless in its ease. She laughed at a small joke he made, a sound that was soft and melodic, and he found himself wanting to hear it again. He shared a small story from his morning, and she listened intently, her eyes bright with curiosity. Neither of them noticed how the minutes stretched into an hour. The barista had come and gone. Other customers had entered and left, but they were lost in a world that belonged only to the two of them. They discovered shared interests, a love for old books, a fascination with quiet mornings, a habit of people watching in cafes. It was uncanny how naturally their lives seemed to intertwine. Even though they had only just met, she felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years, a connection that made her heart feel lighter. He felt a calm he hadn't experienced before, a sense that perhaps he had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. There was no rush, no pressure, just a slow, steady unfolding of two souls beginning to recognize each other as the morning light shifted, painting golden streaks across the wooden floor. They realized they had spent more time than they thought. Neither wanted the moment to end, but the world outside the cafe demanded attention. She had work to go to, papers to grade, and meetings to attend. He had emails to answer, calls to make, and errands to run. Yet, in that brief meeting, something significant had been planted, a seed of curiosity, a hint of something deeper. They parted with a promise to meet again, though neither wanted to make it feel forced. It was a simple, quiet agreement, a mutual understanding that this was just the beginning. As she walked back to her apartment, she couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he had listened so attentively, about the warmth in his smile, about the small, Ordinary gestures that somehow felt extraordinary. She felt a flutter of excitement mixed with a hint of fear. She wasn't sure what this feeling was. She knew it was something rare. He walked down the busy streets, a subtle smile playing on his lips. He felt a sense of anticipation he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. There was a part of him that was skeptical, that worried about disappointment, but another part quieter. Persistent urged him to embrace this moment, to see where it might lead. Throughout the day, both found themselves replaying small moments, the brief brush of hands, the shared laughter, the way their conversation had flowed without effort. It was unusual, this sense of connection, almost as if they had known each other long before this morning. Yet, they had not, and that made it all the more thrilling. Evenings came. They went about their routines, but the morning lingered in their minds. Small gestures reminded them of each other, the aroma of coffee, the sound of a pen scratching across paper, the sight of people sitting quietly in a cafe. Each thought brought a mixture of excitement and calm, a strange duality that neither had expected to feel. They began to wonder what the other was doing, hoping secretly for a message, a sign, a continuation of the morning's unexpected magic. The world felt a little brighter, a little more vibrant, even in the mundane tasks of everyday life. It was as if meeting had shifted something fundamental in the way they saw their surroundings. At night, before sleep claimed them, they each reflected on the day, the chance encounter, and the unspoken connection that had formed. There was no dramatic declaration, no immediate realization of life-changing love, only a quiet acknowledgement that something important had begun, something worth exploring. And so, the first chapter of their story closed, not with fireworks or dramatic gestures, but with a soft, lingering sense of possibility. It was the kind of beginning that promised depth, patience, and the beauty of discovering another person slowly, thoughtfully, and genuinely. The kind of beginning that made them both quietly eager for tomorrow, for the next meeting, for the next chance to see if the magic of this morning could unfold into something lasting in the city that never truly sleeps. Two hearts had found a fleeting connection in a quiet cafe, an unexpected moment that neither would forget. It was a beautiful start, simple yet profound, the kind of encounter that deserved attention, reflection, and care. And as they each lay in bed, thinking of the other, they both knew that life had shifted, subtly but unmistakably, and that something meaningful was waiting just around the corner. The next morning arrived with the same quiet beauty that had marked their first encounter. She woke up with a lingering sense of anticipation, a soft smile on her face that she couldn't explain. The memory of yesterday's chance meeting played in her mind like a favorite song, each note making her heart flutter. She found herself rushing through breakfast, not out of urgency, but because she wanted to be back at the cafe, to see if perhaps he would be there again. He, too, felt an unusual pull. His routine seemed incomplete without seeing her, without sharing another small moment that made the world feel lighter. He wasn't sure if this was love or curiosity, but he knew that the thought of not seeing her again left a strange emptiness in his chest. That morning, he left his apartment earlier than usual, taking the same path lined with trees and fresh morning smells, hoping fate would guide him back to the same cafe. The cafe seemed smaller somehow, but in a comforting way. The sun streamed through the windows, making the wooden tables glow softly. She arrived, notebook in hand, and settled into her favorite spot by the window, pretending to be absorbed in her writing but stealing glances at the entrance every few minutes. Her heart leaped when she saw him step inside, a little unsure, a little hesitant, but unmistakably there. Their eyes met, and this time there was no need for introduction. Smiles were exchanged, the kind that spoke volumes without a single word. He made his way to the table, and they began to talk like old friends, not strangers. There was a warmth in the conversation, an ease that made everything else fade away. The morning passed in a gentle rhythm of laughter, shared stories, and quiet observations. They talked about simple things at first, how the city felt in the morning, favorite places to eat, books that had left an impression. But gradually, the conversation deepened. She spoke about her dreams, the small ambitions she had tucked away for years. And he listened intently, offering thoughtful responses and occasional encouragement. He shared his own quiet wishes, things he rarely voiced, and she listened without judgment, her eyes reflecting a genuine interest that surprised him. As the hours passed, they began to notice the little habits that made each of them unique. She twirled a strand of hair absent-mindedly while thinking. He tapped his fingers on the table when he was trying to remember a story. She had a soft laugh that came from deep within. He had a way of tilting his head slightly when he wanted to show he was truly listening. Every detail seemed to matter, every small gesture significant, weaving a tapestry of connection that neither had expected. It wasn't long before they decided to take a short walk together. Leaving the cozy warmth of the cafe for the cool morning air outside, the streets were lively yet familiar, filled with the quiet hum of city life. They wandered through small lanes, passing bakeries, bookstores, and street musicians playing soft melodies that matched the mood of the morning. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, shifting from trivial matters to heartfelt confessions without missing a beat. She told him about the nights she spent dreaming of a life full of small joys and meaningful connections, and he shared memories of childhood adventures and the people who had shaped his world. They laughed at each other's stories, sometimes in disbelief, sometimes in pure amusement. It was a rare kind of companionship, where comfort and curiosity met in equal measure. At one point they stumbled upon a small park, the kind with wooden benches and an old fountain that whispered with the gentle flow of water. They sat side by side, sharing a quiet moment, letting the world move around them while they remained in their own little bubble. He noticed the way her eyes followed the birds hopping along the grass, the way she smiled softly when she caught a leaf floating down. She noticed the gentle lines of his face, the calm presence he carried without even trying. A small disagreement arose when they wanted to explore different paths, but it wasn't serious. Instead, it became an opportunity to understand each other better, to see how patience and compromise could work in the simplest ways. They learned that even small conflicts could become moments of connection when approached with care and respect. Lunch came, and they decided to grab a sandwich from a small deli they both had never tried. They found a quiet corner to sit, sharing bites and stories, discovering tastes and memories together. She told him about the meals she had loved as a child, the ones that reminded her of family and comfort. He shared his own favorite foods and the small rituals that made him feel at home. Every word, every shared experience added depth to the bond that was growing stronger with each passing hour. After lunch, they visited a bookstore that seemed almost magical, with shelves stretching to the ceiling and hidden corners where one could get lost in stories for hours. They wandered together, picking up books, sharing thoughts on authors and stories, and occasionally bumping into each other in the narrow aisles. She found comfort in his presence, a sense that no matter where she turned, he was there in the same space. Equally engaged in the world they were exploring together, the afternoon sun began to dip, painting the city with golden hues, and they realized how much time had passed. Neither wanted the day to end, yet both knew that life outside their shared moments still called. They walked back toward the cafe, not needing words to express the reluctance they felt. The quiet companionship between them had grown into something undeniable, a gentle recognition of shared moments and mutual understanding. Before parting, they lingered for a moment outside the cafe, exchanging glances that spoke more than words could. A promise of another meeting hung in the air, unspoken but clear. She felt her heart race with a mix of excitement and nervousness, and he felt a warmth in his chest that was both comforting and exhilarating. There was no need for dramatic declarations. The simple act of being together had said enough. As they went their separate ways, the city around them seemed brighter, more alive. She thought about the way he had listened to her, the thoughtful questions he had asked, and the way he had made her feel seen in a way that was rare. He thought about the quiet joy she had brought into his morning, the ease of their conversation, and the sense that perhaps, for the first time in a long while, it was exactly where he was meant to be. The days that followed continued in a similar pattern. They met regularly, exploring the city together, sharing meals, books, stories, and laughter. Each encounter revealed new layers of their personalities. new quirks and habits that made them fall more naturally into each other's company. They began to anticipate each other's thoughts, finish each other's sentences, and find comfort in the shared silences that had once felt uncomfortable with others. Sometimes, they would sit quietly, each absorbed in their own thoughts, yet completely aware of the other's presence. The world outside seemed to fade, leaving only the gentle hum of life and the warmth of companionship. They discovered a rhythm that felt effortless, a balance between independence and connection that made every moment together feel precious. Challenges began to surface. Small at first, testing the patience and understanding they had built. Miscommunications and differences in opinion occasionally led to brief tension. But each time, they approached it with care, striving to understand rather than to argue. These moments, rather than driving them apart, became opportunities to deepen their connection, to learn more about each other, and to strengthen the trust forming between them, even in moments of disagreement. There was an underlying respect and consideration that spoke volumes about the foundation of their relationship. They learned that love wasn't just about shared laughter and perfect moments, but also about navigating imperfections together, understanding each other's fears, and finding ways to bridge gaps with patience and empathy. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, they found themselves sitting on a park bench. Reflecting on the journey that had begun just days ago, she shared her fears of opening her heart too quickly, of being vulnerable. And he admitted his worries about trust and letting someone in after years of keeping his emotions guarded. Yet, in those confessions, they found solace. The honesty of their words became a bridge, a reminder that connection was built not just on joy, but also on truth and understanding. As night fell, they walked back through quiet streets, hands brushing occasionally, a gentle reminder of the bond forming between them. The city lights reflected in their eyes, mirroring the quiet excitement and anticipation of what lay ahead. There was no rush, no pressure, only the slow, steady unfolding of two lives beginning to intertwine by the end of the week. Their routine of shared mornings and afternoons had become something they both looked forward to with quiet eagerness. Every meeting, every conversation, every shared moment added a layer of depth to their connection. They had discovered the joy of companionship, the beauty of understanding, and the comfort of knowing that someone cared deeply, not just for the moments they shared, but for the person they truly were. And so, the story of their growing closeness continued, not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with the gentle, profound moments that make love feel real and enduring. They had found in each other a presence that was both comforting and exciting, a connection that promised growth, understanding, and the quiet thrill of discovering life together. One moment at a time, days passed, and the bond between them grew stronger, each meeting a little deeper than the last. They had begun to share not only laughter and stories, but also the quiet vulnerabilities that most people kept hidden. There was comfort in knowing someone understood the unspoken. Someone noticed the little details that made life both difficult and beautiful. One afternoon, as they walked through a familiar street, she noticed a shadow cross his face, a flicker of something she hadn't seen before. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but her intuition told her that something was troubling him. She hesitated, unsure if she should ask. But the concern in her eyes was enough for him to pause and meet her gaze. He sighed softly, as though carrying a weight he had been holding alone. He spoke about a sudden change at work, a project that demanded more of his time than he could give, leaving him stressed and restless. She listened quietly, offering gentle words of encouragement. But she could sense that the worry went beyond the surface issue. It was a window into the deeper fears he rarely shared, fears of failing, of disappointing those who depended on him, and perhaps of losing himself in the process. She reached out, her hand brushing his arm lightly, a gesture of comfort. He looked at her, surprised at how much warmth and understanding a simple touch could convey. It wasn't a solution to the problem, but it was enough to make the tension ease slightly. In that moment, he realized that part of love wasn't fixing everything, it was standing beside someone when life felt heavy, even if nothing could be immediately changed. Later that evening, She found herself replaying the encounter in her mind. She admired his strength, his quiet determination, and yet she wished he would allow himself to lean on someone else more often. She didn't want to push him, only to let him know that he didn't have to carry everything alone. She hoped he could see that their connection wasn't just about shared joys, but also about support when times were difficult. The following week brought unexpected challenges. She received news that a personal project she had been nurturing for years faced delays, creating a mixture of frustration and self-doubt. She hesitated to share it at first, unsure if she should burden him with her problems after seeing him stressed. Yet, when they met, the unspoken understanding between them encouraged her. To speak openly, he listened with the same attentiveness he had shown her, asking questions, offering gentle encouragement, and sharing moments from his own experiences that resonated with her struggles. It wasn't about offering advice, but about showing that they could carry each other's burdens together. That understanding alone could ease the weight of disappointment and frustration. They began to notice a pattern in their interactions, moments of joy interspersed with small trials, challenges that tested their patience and yet strengthened the bond they shared. It was in these moments that they truly learned about each other, discovering resilience, empathy, and the unspoken depth of care that grew quietly but steadily. One evening, after a particularly long day, they found themselves walking in a quiet park, the city lights reflecting softly on the paths around them. He was unusually quiet, and she sensed the tension lingering in his shoulders. Without pressing, she reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. The simple touch conveyed 1,000 unspoken words, a reminder that he wasn't alone, that she was there to share the weight, no matter how heavy it seemed. He finally spoke, admitting that the pressures he had been under were affecting him more than he cared to acknowledge. He confessed that he sometimes felt trapped between responsibilities and personal desires, unsure how to balance the two. She listened without interruption, her presence offering reassurance more powerful than any words could. Their conversation shifted to dreams and fears, an intimate exchange that neither had shared with anyone else. She spoke of her anxieties, the moments when self-doubt clouded her confidence, and he responded with honesty about his own insecurities. There was no judgment, only a mutual understanding that life was rarely simple. But sharing it made the challenges more bearable. In the weeks that followed, they encountered small disagreements, often about trivial matters that in any other context might have been frustrating. Yet each time they approached it with patience and respect, choosing understanding over pride. These moments, while minor, revealed the strength of their connection, the way they valued each other's perspectives, and the willingness to compromise without resentment. One afternoon, they attended a small art exhibition together. They wandered through the quiet rooms, observing paintings, sculptures, and photographs that spoke of human emotion in ways words sometimes could not. She noticed how he paused thoughtfully at each piece, considering not just the artwork, but what it meant to him. He noticed the way her eyes lit up when a painting resonated with her, the way she murmured thoughts under her breath. As if sharing them with someone who truly understood, they discussed the art, sometimes agreeing, sometimes seeing it differently, yet never with conflict, only curiosity and exploration. It was a reflection of their growing relationship, a balance between individuality and connection. Each conversation, each shared experience, was a thread weaving their lives together, creating a fabric strong enough to endure challenges, yet delicate enough to cherish each moment. Yet life was not without its tests. One day he received news that required immediate attention, an unexpected family responsibility that demanded time and focus. He hesitated, unsure how to manage it without disrupting the connection he had with her. She noticed his hesitation and offered support, not demanding answers or explanations, only a willingness to stand by him while he navigated the situation, he realized. In that quiet moment, that love wasn't about grand gestures or constant presence. It was about patience, understanding, and the ability to support someone even when circumstances pulled them in different directions. She had shown him that, not with words, but with actions, the gentle assurance that she would be there when he returned. Meanwhile, she faced her own moments of doubt, A project she had invested in faced criticism, leaving her questioning her abilities. He noticed the subtle change in her demeanor, the hesitation in her speech, the small sighs that escaped her lips. He offered encouragement, reminding her gently of her strengths, the effort she had put in, and the value of persistence. His words, simple yet heartfelt, helped her regain confidence, showing the power of support when it is genuine and timely. Over time, they realized that their connection was more than companionship. It was a partnership in the truest sense. They celebrated small victories together, shared in quiet disappointments, discovered that the challenges they faced were opportunities to strengthen their bond rather than weaken it. Life was unpredictable, full of unforeseen trials, yet in each other, they found stability, comfort, and a source of unwavering support. One evening, they sat by a quiet riverside, watching the water reflect the fading sunlight. She spoke softly, almost in a whisper, about how life often felt overwhelming, and how rare it was to find someone who understood without judgment. He nodded, squeezing her hand gently, sharing his own thoughts about the importance of connection and the value of having someone to lean on when the world felt heavy. They spoke of the future, not in grandiose terms, but in simple hopes, continuing to grow, to learn, to support each other, and to cherish the moments they shared. There was a quiet joy in knowing that their connection had endured small trials, yet each trial had only made it stronger. It was a reassurance that love was not just about perfection, but about acceptance, patience, and the courage to be vulnerable. As night fell, they walked back through the city, their hands intertwined, a quiet comfort in the shared warmth. The challenges of the day, the stress, and the uncertainties faded in the presence of each other. They understood that love was not always easy, but the effort it required was worth every moment. By the end of this chapter in their story, they had faced challenges that tested patience, understanding, and trust. Yet, through each trial, they discovered a deeper connection, a quiet resilience, a shared commitment to being present for one another. They had learned that love was not only about joy and laughter, but also about weathering difficulties together, embracing vulnerability, and finding strength in each other. In the stillness of the night, they reflected on the journey so far, realizing that the unexpected meeting that had brought them together had grown into something meaningful and enduring. Their bond had been tested, nurtured, and strengthened, laying the foundation for a deeper, lasting love. They knew that more challenges would come, but they also knew that together they could face whatever life had in store. With patience, understanding, and the quiet joy of being together. One morning, they decided to take a trip outside the city. A small journey to a nearby town that promised fresh scenery and a temporary escape from their usual routines. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth, and the sun shone gently on the winding roads. They walked hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing, the simplicity of the day making each moment feel significant. They found a small cafe overlooking a river, where they sat and watched the water flow quietly. She spoke about her dreams for the future, the life she imagined, and the small joys she wished to cultivate. He shared his own hopes, the ambitions that had stayed with him, and the lessons he had learned from the challenges life had thrown his way. They listened to each other with full attention, appreciating the honesty and trust that had developed between them as the day unfolded. They explored the town together, discovering hidden paths, quaint shops, and quiet gardens. They laughed at small missteps, such as getting lost on narrow streets or spilling a little coffee, and found joy in the unpredictability of the day. Each shared experience deepened their bond, making them realize that the beauty of life often lay in the unexpected and the ordinary, especially when experienced together. In the late afternoon, they climbed a gentle hill that overlooked the town. From there, the view stretched across rooftops, rivers, and distant mountains. They stood quietly, taking in the scene, feeling a sense of awe that was amplified by the presence of each other. She leaned on his shoulder, and he held her gently, the quiet comfort of that moment speaking volumes about the depth of their connection. Words were unnecessary. The silence between them was filled with understanding, trust, and affection. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, they talked about the journey that had brought them to this point. They reflected on the chance meeting at the small cafe, the long walks, the shared laughter, and the challenges they had faced together. Each memory carried weight, a reminder of how far they had come and how their relationship had grown into something meaningful and enduring. They also acknowledged the fears and doubts that had once lingered at the edges of their hearts. Moments of uncertainty, past disappointments, personal struggles had tested them, but they had faced these challenges together. It was in overcoming these trials and supporting each other through small and large difficulties that they had discovered the resilience and depth of their love as night fell. The town's lights began to twinkle like scattered stars, reflecting softly in the river below. They sat on a bench near the water, holding hands, sharing quiet smiles, and appreciating the stillness of the night. There was a profound sense of contentment in the simplicity of the moment, a recognition that their journey had led them to a place of mutual respect, understanding, and deep affection. In the following days, they continued to nurture their relationship with small acts of care and consideration. He would surprise her with small gestures, like bringing her favorite pastry or leaving a note with words of encouragement. She responded with similar thoughtfulness, remembering details that mattered to him and showing her appreciation in quiet, meaningful ways. These gestures, though simple, carried immense significance. Reinforcing the bond they shared, they also faced new challenges as life's unpredictability continued to test them. Work demands family responsibilities. Personal doubts occasionally created tension. But they approached each situation with patience, empathy, and open communication. They discovered that love was not just about joy and shared pleasures, but also about the ability to navigate difficulties together, to support one another, and to grow stronger through shared experiences. One evening, they attended a small gathering of friends. While surrounded by laughter and conversation, they found themselves quietly observing each other, sharing knowing glances and subtle touches that conveyed their connection. They realized that even in the presence of others, their bond had become a private language, a silent understanding that needed no words. It was a reassurance that no matter what else happened, they were present for each other. Another afternoon, they visited a quiet library, wandering through aisles of books that smelled of paper and history. They shared recommendations, laughed at old stories, and discussed the characters and worlds within the pages. In these moments, they discovered new facets of each other, the way she could get lost in imagination, the depth of his reflections, the joy of discovering shared interests. These simple joys reminded them that love was as much about companionship as it was about passion. As weeks turned into months, their connection deepened further. They had learned to celebrate each other's strengths, accept weaknesses, and embrace differences. Arguments became opportunities for understanding rather than conflict, and moments of silence became spaces for comfort rather than discomfort. They had built a relationship rooted in trust, empathy, and mutual respect, a partnership that felt both rare and precious. One particularly quiet evening, they walked along the river, the water reflecting the glow of the moon. They talked about their dreams for the future, not in abstract or grandiose terms, but in simple, attainable hopes, continuing to grow together, supporting each other, and cherishing the life they were building. They acknowledged the challenges that might come, knowing that together they could face anything. There was a quiet joy in this shared vision, a reassurance that their love was strong enough to endure time and circumstance. The city around them was alive, but in each other's presence the world seemed to slow. They found contentment in small pleasures, holding hands while walking, sharing meals, discussing books, or simply sitting quietly together. They had learned that love was not always dramatic or loud, but often lived in the quiet. Consistent acts of care and attention that made life richer and more meaningful. They also began to consider the deeper aspects of commitment, not just romantic, but emotional and personal commitment, being there for each other through highs and lows, supporting ambitions and dreams, and creating a space where vulnerability was safe. These reflections brought a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly love someone. Beyond passion or infatuation, in the final weeks of the year they reflected on their journey. From a chance meeting in a small cafe to the quiet companionship, shared experiences, and mutual growth, they had traveled far together in a short time. Each challenge they had faced, each joyful moment they had shared, had strengthened the bond and made their connection more resilient. As the story reached its culmination, they understood that love was not a destination but a journey, one that required patience, empathy, understanding, and shared effort. Their journey was far from over, but the foundation they had built promised a future filled with mutual respect, deep affection, and enduring companionship. One quiet evening, they sat together on a hill overlooking the city, watching the lights twinkle below. They held hands, feeling the warmth and reassurance of each other's presence. Words were unnecessary. The comfort, trust, and love between them spoke more clearly than any conversation ever could. They knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but they were ready to face them together. Confident in the strength of the bond they had nurtured, as the stars appeared above, they reflected on the beautiful, unexpected journey that had brought them together. It had begun with a chance encounter, grown through shared experiences, laughter, and challenges, and evolved into a deep, enduring love. They understood that true love was patient, kind, and resilient, built not on perfection, but on understanding, respect, and the quiet moments that defined a shared life. With hearts full of hope and contentment, they embraced the future together, ready for whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. Their love was no longer just a story of meeting and growing close. It was a story of enduring connection, mutual growth, and the joy of discovering life with someone who truly understood and valued them. And in that understanding, they found not only love, but the promise of a lifetime shared in harmony, respect, and unwavering care.